Hiya! Thanks for joining me here today. Lighting's not too great in this room today. I hope the sound's okay, but apologies if everything's a bit off. I wanted to do a quick update. I'm off out tonight, and for various reasons, it's going to be a couple of days before I get to wear makeup again. And I wanted to take this opportunity just to record something to give you an update on what it is that I'm doing at the moment. So, since my last video, a lot of things have changed. There's been a lot of progress with me. I've been to see my GP. I've had a big discussion with them about my gender identity. We sat down, had a discussion, and as a result, they've made a referral to the Tavistock. So I've now been referred to the Tavistock. That means another probably 5 years minimum wait before anything is addressed on the NHS. I've discussed with my GP their sort of view on this. They are very supportive. I'm pretty sure the GP I spoke to is sort of within the LGBT community and was a really nice person, very sympathetic, but ultimately not able to do much to help me, which is a bit of a statement, I guess, about the UK today and where some people are with regard to gender identity, etc. Now, I have been going into this being quite clear that I see myself very much as non-binary. I still don't see myself as a pure trans woman in the sense that I don't really want to live full-time as a woman. That's not the agenda that I'm looking for here. But I am looking to do something where my day-to-day gender identity matches much better with how I feel inside. So that's the NHS path kind of addressed, and that will now trundle on for several years. I've had my letter back from the Tavistock. I've gone through the advice that they've given me. One thing that does seem to have changed is there doesn't seem to be any reference whatsoever to any form of GP prescriptions for anti-androgens that would suppress male hormone development, which I think from previous years' guidance was something that might have been recommended. I now no longer see that as something you should kind of inquire with your GP about, but they do talk about other things like treatments you can use for your face to help with beard growth, for example. Now, with that in mind, I am already taking a couple of steps, and I've taken a few more steps just to get things rolling a little bit faster. So I've been considering my options. The various options available to me are kind of to go through self-medication, to go through Gender GP, or to go through one of the other UK-based private services that will diagnose and prescribe hormone therapy or any form of treatment, but everything that you do is either needing to be done in a shared care arrangement with your GP or would need to be done through private means. Now, I've already discussed with my GP. My GP is not able to enter into any form of shared care agreement. They were very keen to point out that it's got nothing to do with gender identity issues. They would have the same view on something where there's a lot of requests for share care, something like ADHD medication, where you've had a private diagnosis of ADHD and you want to be able to access medication through the NHS. They would not be willing to enter into a shared care agreement for that or for any other purposes whatsoever. So they're very keen to make sure that I understand it's nothing to do with gender identity. It's not to do with me as an individual. It's a practice policy that they have, and that means I need to go shopping around for another GP in my local area that might be able to enter into shared care. If you're not familiar, shared care is, as I said earlier, basically where a private practice will prescribe medication. They will provide the GP with a complete overview of their diagnosis and the information they have, and then the GP agrees under the NHS to continue providing those prescriptions, but as NHS prescriptions. So it's a shared care arrangement where the diagnosis comes from the private practice, but the prescriptions come from the NHS, and therefore the medication is much cheaper. Now, it turns out there are 3 GPs within my area that are already identified as being ones that will support shared care, some of whom have dedicated people who have knowledge of, let's say, gender related treatment issues, etc. One of whom has a specialist they've had there since I think well into 2024, and this advice dates from December 2024, so it's pretty recent information, up to date advice. And I'm going to be talking to all 3 of those GPs, one of which is in my local town, which is great. In fact, it's my old GP, which is a bit annoying. Before I changed to my current GP, it's the previous GP I was already with, but whatever, these are little things that are sent to try us. And I may have to go back to them. Now, other things I have done in terms of my decision. My decision has been to pursue, let's say, the best type of care that I can afford. I've had recommendations to look at self-medication. I have really struggled with that. There used to be quite a number of Reddit forums where information would be shared, but I think there have been targeted attempts to get certain providers shut down. This is just my understanding, it may or may not be true, where some providers have been targeted because their information has been shared online. It's been very easy for people to find out who's prescribing these medications, and potentially they are targeted and they can be shut down. They obviously have to import these drugs from outside of the UK, from a country that is able to legally prescribe these drugs for people such as myself. But that means there's always been a risk of confiscation during customs and importation. And I didn't feel that that was let's say, a particularly steady way to go about doing this. Also, information was really quite scarce. Now, my situation is I'm relatively lucky in that I can afford to look at private practice and private care. And so I'm at least pursuing that for some of my early interactions. I looked at Gender GP and I decided not to go with Gender GP based on more recent advice that suggests and feedback that it's a bit more bot related, less individualistic, etc. And I settled on a UK based company called the Gender Hormone Clinic. Now, they have pretty good reviews online, and I've spoken to a few people who refer them pretty well. They're not cheap, but they're UK based and they're relatively local, so that I can visit them kind of at my convenience in London or in Birmingham. And I've already had my assessment, psychological assessment, whatever you want to call it, and I've received a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. So that is a very, very interesting thing that I went through recently. I sat down for a 90-minute consultation with the loveliest woman ever. She was absolutely delighted to talk to. I was pretty nervous going into it. I didn't know how to present myself. When I spoke to my GP, for example, saw my slightly longer nails, my painted nails. I was wearing jewelry, but I'd pretty much gone along in jeans and a t-shirt. And my GP made no comment about how I presented, but did ask about the degree to which I was expressing my gender identity in my day-to-day life, which is increasing and increasing as I go forward. They asked a number of questions at my GP about things like how I felt, how my family felt, did they know, who knew, was I out at work, most of which I've done a lot of work with. A lot of people at work know about this. Most people I work with on a regular basis. I sometimes present in a sort of androgynous mode when I'm on my calls, and my family obviously know all about this and are they're fully aware with what I'm doing with regard to this. My GP didn't ask any questions about my attraction to anyone, so I was quite pleased. I wasn't expecting them to, but I have heard horror stories about people mixing up gender identity with sexuality, and there were no questions about anything along those lines. But it was a decent sort of conversation. They did ask about autism and about whether I felt I'd ever had any diagnosis of autism or anything. And I think this is that ongoing link between autism and gender identity. I think it was let's say, a well-meaning question, and I took it as such. It didn't feel necessarily like fishing, and for me, I don't think of myself as being in any way autistic. There's a number of things I have to do, such as presenting, doing this kind of activity that you obviously can do. I don't know enough about autism to be able to be an expert on this, but I've never had anyone amateur diagnose me. I've never had anyone consider that as part of my sort of makeup, and it doesn't really make sense to me that that would be something. I consider myself quite analytical, and I am methodical, but I don't think that stretches to the lengths of anything related to autism. I'm certainly not qualified to say one way or another, but no, I've never had any concerns along those lines. But when I spoke to the actual psychiatrist, when I was speaking to the gender expert for actually identifying what my status is, the sort of gatekeeper activity, if you will, for accessing more care, it was great. It was a 90-minute conversation, really interesting. I chose to kind of semi-present. I had my regular hair, so I wasn't wearing a wig or anything, but I wore some light makeup. I kind of dressed as I would dress on a day-to-day basis, sort of quite ambiguous, a bit male, a bit female, sort of somewhere in the middle, just whatever clothes I happen to like and whatever clothes I think go well on that day. I was quite nervous about this as being, like I said, a gatekeeping activity of specifically not wanting to try to get a particular diagnosis. So I went in there very clear that I don't consider myself to be a trans woman. I don't particularly want to go towards surgery of any kind. I don't see that being in my future. And things change, But right now, from where I am today, it's honest of me to say that I don't see myself going into that pathway. 5 years' time, who knows? But what was interesting in our conversation was she asked an awful lot about how I felt, what my experience were. I found myself opening up about things I haven't talked about in years, some sort of difficult experiences from my childhood, and things that have affected me greatly. And we talked a lot about how I consider myself to be gender neutral, whatever you want to term it, gender fluid. I just do not consider myself to be in that pathway towards a flip to being female. I want to be somewhere where I can navigate those middle waters. And that was well received. We talked about specifically, which I thought was a very good way of addressing it, was I'm feeling better in myself about how I present myself on a day-to-day basis. I'm happier in our marriage. We're happier than we've been at any point, I think at any point in the past, where we really do know each other better. And the key question came down to, if that was taken away from you, how would that affect you? And for me, it would be pretty devastating. I've tried living without this. I've tried living without this presentation for many, many years. And it doesn't work. It's kind of soul destroying. I don't look in a mirror and think I have to be female, but if I can't be me, if I'm forced to conform with something that is not me, it's terrible. And it results in issues with my health, issues with the way I mentally feel about my life, and it makes me sad and miserable. And yeah, I have a terrible, terrible time of it. So what came from this was I have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, and that now puts me in a position where I can go forward with talking with someone about what to do next in terms of hormone treatments. So I have a video consultation towards the end of April. That will kind of set up the discussion. I've got all of my other things ready. I have to sort out my blood tests. That's the only thing I haven't done. I've got my full GP medical record. That's been sent to the provider that I'm using. I have everything else listed out, and I'm ready for that video meeting. And then all I need to do is get the face-to-face meeting booked. And after that, it's on to some form of hormone treatment. So the next video kind of in this discussion point, I think and I hope will be based around, having had those conversations, where have we landed in terms of how I am going to address hormones. So to what degree, strength, speed does this get attacked? Is it microdosing? Is it something more positive, more definitive? And that will come down to the conversations I've had with my family about preserving the ability to reverse something if it's not exactly what we'd hoped, and particularly to allow this to go forward, but in a measured and controlled way. So yeah, that's going to be the next conversation that we have. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm, incredibly happy with how all of this is going, and it's really making rapid steps forward. And yeah, I'm comfortable with the decision that I've made, which is to go through this private practice. I'm aware it's very expensive. I would assume all in that by the time I start getting medication, my outlay for this is going to be heading towards £1,000. Now, it happens, I got a bonus recently that's been put aside to pay for some of those things. But it's incredibly expensive, especially when you consider that almost every single person I'm seeing is employed by the NHS. They are all willing to support you. They are just not allowed to support you in a way that goes through the NHS due to the timelines. But most of the people I'm speaking to are almost entirely NHS employees and are doing this as part of a private practice on the side. Talking to the same people, just paying to jump that queue. So I'm in the queue for the Tavistock, but the way I see this is that I can do this in my own way. And like anything else, I think it's sensible to do the best thing you can afford to do. And this happens to be the best thing that I can afford to do in this case. I don't even know how much the drugs are going to cost, whatever, because I don't obviously know what I'm going to be taking. But that's a decision that we'll also have to factor into this. At some point in the future, I could go down self-medication. I really don't want to. I'd rather have what seems to me to be a more reliable source of access to treatment than attempting self-medication. But that's what makes me comfortable, and I'd be really interested in what other people's experiences are. I know there are people out there who have contacted me and said they self-medicate and it works really, really well. They're very happy, and they do their own blood tests, and they measure everything, and they're doing things really diligently. I did so much research. I genuinely think that I could get my blood test done, self-medicate, do it in a way that is reasonable and lowers my risk. I feel I have the knowledge now from the research I've done to be able to do that, but it's access. that I have a problem with, and it's reliability of the drugs that you're purchasing. Are they, let's say, quality manufactured? Are they homegrown? And I don't want to particularly get involved in anything related to homegrown. I think it's, if it was your only choice, if you literally couldn't afford anything else, I would never judge anyone for doing that. It is, like I say, I think people should do the best they can afford to do to look after their mental health. And this happens to be the best I can afford to do. And so I will pursue that. Anyway, that's my update for now. Yeah, exciting times, really fun. And I feel very lucky that my family are on board with me with this. And yeah, it's a really, really great time. Thanks for joining me today. Any comments, please let me know down below. Really, really interested in what your thoughts are. If you want to reach out to me through email, you can do so through julietteisnoir@gmail.com. I'll put something on here just to indicate that. But yeah, I really would be interested in what your thoughts are, and yeah, what have been your experiences, and how does my experience sort of relate to what you've done? I think I'll do a detailed breakdown on the conversation I had with my, when I got my dysphoria diagnosis, and what that means to me in terms of my level of dysphoria compared to other people. But it's just really nice to be recognised, and I think that's the point. It's recognised, it's now there, and it's another firm step to be able to move forward. So, thanks for joining me today. Look forward to talking to you again. And as ever, bye. Bye. I'm off out. Party time.